Thank you, Doug. A very lovely and generous introduction and extended introduction. It's given me a whole new concept of billable hours. And I love the kind of informal way that he gathered his flock. Did you notice that as we started? I thought it was wonderful. It's kind of a model for General Conference. I can see President Monson standing up and say, well, if you see Tom Perry, bring him up here. Somebody watch for Todd Christofferson. Thank you. Thank you, Doug, really. It has been a walk down memory lane from 25 years ago. I haven't had a chance to reminisce with Ralph personally about that, but maybe we will later, even actually tonight. But it has been fun to remember that. And I think Linda prayed then and prayed now. You're our designated prayer, Linda. So if my memory recalls all of that. Well, I'm intimidated to be here. I'm just quick to say that right out of the chute. And the only way I can put that in context is to tell you one of my favorite Ernest Wilkinson stories. Ernest being a terrific link between Washington, D.C. and Brigham Young University and the law school. In the latter part of his tenure at the university, Ernest gave a significant committee assignment to a group of faculty members led by a very distinguished faculty member who was, as I recall, teaching in the liberal arts or the behavioral sciences or something. Don't remember exactly what the assignment was and don't really remember who the faculty member was, but he was an able man in any case, and when the time came for the report, the committee submitted their findings complete with recommendations. Ernest went absolutely ballistic. I don't know what the findings and recommendations were that he wanted, but they obviously were not these. He went red in the face, chewed on the inside of his cheek as he was wont to do, generally raged unrestrained for several minutes. The wallpaper peeled back in a place or two, lights in the room flickered. All breathing by everyone present ceased. And then, as quickly as he had exploded, Ernest grew absolutely calm. A more natural color returned to his face. He stopped chewing his cheek. His eyes came back into focus. The electric circuit serving the room and the man came back to normal. And with a steady gaze out his window toward the snowy summit of Mount Timpanogos, a gaze I myself would later make, Ernest threw the report on the desk and in full philosophical resignation muttered to no one in particular, "Well, what can you expect from a man not trained in the law?" Can you imagine the indictment I feel as I stand before you tonight, not trained in the law? It's almost more than I can bear. Even in my 73rd year, I stand before you ashamed. I apologize. In spite of this severe handicap, I will do my best. And we'll try to be brief, lest I see some of you going red in the face and chewing the inside of your cheek. Of the many issues we could discuss tonight, may I touch on just three that my brethren and I talk a good deal about these days as we look at the world around us in the initial years of the 21st century. You will recognize quickly that they're not necessarily new issues and they are not uniquely Latter-day Saint in nature, though they may increasingly be latter-day in nature. They are, I am sure, things you've thought about as LDS professionals, LDS parents, LDS citizens in communities large and small. The three issues: faith, family, and religious freedom. In his influential book of a few years ago, A Secular Age, Charles Taylor called secularism the shift from a society in which it was virtually impossible not to believe in God to one in which faith, even for the staunchest believer, is only one human possibility among others. Belief in God is no longer axiomatic. Our era has been given other labels, post-Christian and postmodern, to name two, but they are of a piece with Taylor's thesis. Such an age, whatever it's called, has created a climate for popularizing the diminution or minimizing of religious faith in a way that is unprecedented in Western culture, or certainly in American culture. Just so very few years ago, anyone openly advocating atheism would surely have had a scarlet A seared upon his or her breast as a warning to all who would come near. But listen now to Richard Dawkins. Only the willfully blind could fail to implicate the divisive force of religion in most, if not all, of the violent enmities of the world today. Those of us who have for years politely concealed our contempt for the dangerous collective delusion of religion need to stand up and speak out. And many have. After Sam Harris published his provocative The End of Faith in 2005, Christopher Hitchens, Daniel Dennett, Dawkins himself, and their new band of atheists called New Atheists, have achieved near celebrity status, publishing a deluge of texts decrying belief in God. Hitchens spoke for most of them when he said, "One reason I've always detested religion is its sly tendency to insinuate the idea that the universe is designed with you in mind, or even worse, that there is a divine plan." Of course, Brother Hitchens has just recently passed away, and I note genuinely and with all my affection for missionary matters, prompting me that he may now have newer views on the idea of a divine plan. Never mind that militant atheism is the ultimate untenable position, simply because it would take someone with God's omniscience and omnipresence to be sure that nowhere in the universe was there such an omniscient and omnipresent being. Catch 22. But I digress with philosophical nitpicking. We have the larger ranks of the agnostics, the more nuanced of which pick and choose from the smorgasbord of religion, admiring the rational or the service-oriented or the pro-social parts of religion while eschewing any claims of ultimate truth, doctrines of salvation, or considerations of life after death. But there are severe problems with such positions because the historical fact of the matter is these, and I quote, vague, uplifting, non-doctrinal religiosity doesn't actually last very long, nor does it withstand anything approaching the tragic in human experience. As one national commentator has written, the religions that grow, succor, and motivate people to perform heroic acts are theologically rigorous, very arduous in practice, and certainly definite in their convictions about what is true and what is false. I loved what Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks of Great Britain said a few years ago in this same vein. I quote, "You read Jane Austen and you put it back on the shelf and it makes no further demand on you until you feel like reading it again. But you read a sacred text and you put it back on the shelf and it is still making a demand on you long after you've tried to forget it. It is saying this is a truth to be lived. That is the difference between religion and culture. Unless you hear a command or an obligation that comes from beyond you, and I would add above you, you will not be able to generate sustainable, actionable faith." But such persuasive insight notwithstanding, the cultural shift of our day, including in the United States, continues to be characterized by less and less affiliation with organized or institutional religion. In the last 5 years alone, the religiously unaffiliated have increased from just over 15% to just under 20% of all U.S. adults, the Pew Forum on Religious Life recently reported. Their ranks now include, I continue the quote, more than 13 million self-described atheists and agnostics, as well as